Well, President Biden released his budget request for the 2022 fiscal year, Sean, to the tune of over $1.5 trillion.
That's actually cheap considering all the other stuff.
Seriously, it feels like it at this point. And, you know, it has some economists raising their eyebrows, with one saying it's, quote, get this, the most reckless fiscal policy in the last half century. Here to react is former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Trump, Russ Vought. Russ, so great to see you. You know, so many economists on both sides of the aisle are saying that this is crazy and reckless. What are your initial thoughts?
I agree with them. And the fact is, it's only a third of the budget. Two-thirds of it come later in the year because they don't have their act together. And so you have a $1.5 trillion budget that has a 41% increase in education, a 23% increase in health and human services, and we can't even find any money to have a legitimate increase in defense. So it does share with the American people what their priorities are, and it's a bad view.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that. You're absolutely right. I think it was shocking to me. I think, what is it, 2% increase in defense. We're facing massive international challenges from China, from North Korea, from Iran, from Russia. And you're right. What does that say about the priorities that you're going to plus up education 40%? But at a time when China is growing its military by leaps and bounds, we have a defense plus up of 2% when we've got aging ships and planes?
It's totally unserious. I mean, we need a massive increase in maritime superiority in shipbuilding. You look at the border right now, we have a border crisis, and it only gets 0.2% increase, and then they don't really give us a lot of details about where they're going to fund that. But we know that it's going to have a hard time getting money for things like the Customs and Border Patrol and USCIS and all these other important agencies that keep our country safe on the southern border.
You know, Russ, in an interview with 60 Minutes, we showed this earlier, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said he's predicting a record job and economic growth immediately. So why do we need all this spending if we're about to boom?
Because they're trying to expand government as fast as they possibly can and use the situation that they have to be able to get this stuff across the finish line. You know, I saw over the course of the day they shifted from talking about infrastructure to talk about a jobs plan because of the way that their plan faced such resistance in terms of being able to redefine that word. But they're trying to move from an aggressively radical standpoint, and my hope is that Congress slows it down and puts some sanity into the process.
It's the thing that I think is so funny is this budget was $1.5 trillion, right, which is a lot of money. You talked about all of the plus-ups in these areas, and yet you've got a COVID bill that's $2 trillion plus, and now you have an infrastructure bill that's $2 trillion plus. I cannot believe how much money this is that we're going to blow in a 12-month period. I mean, have you or we as a country ever seen anything like this?
No, I mean, they're clearly they're rivaling the amounts that we were spending in World War II and even going beyond that at some point soon in terms of the deficit as a percent of GDP. And so that was obviously a moment of war. And if you're looking at where we are right now, last year was our warlike year in terms of being able to throw everything we possibly could to get out of a pandemic and an economic crisis. We don't have the ability to do that on the basis of every single year in our budgeting process.
Can I ask you, you know, it's interesting because you just mentioned how much you guys did last year to get funding for vaccines, to get the economy going, to make sure that people kind of kept money in their pocket and kept the economy stimulated. So if Jerome Powell's prediction comes true and we have this massive increase in job creation and economic growth, how much credit does President Trump deserve?
Tremendous amount of pressure, a tremendous amount of credit in terms of he made sure that every step of the way we were going to do everything we could to have the policy and the funding that was necessary to invest, whether that was starting early with developing a vaccine, whether that was trying to make sure the states had every resource they had. You know, I was on many of those calls when the governor would call and say, I need X, Y, and Z, and we were really pushing to be able to make sure that they had it. And so that, you know, President Trump deserves the lion's share where we are in being able to fight this to make sure this isn't a prolonged pandemic and economic crisis.
Russ, before we let you go, I know that you've recently formed a new think tank. What's the goal of that?
Yeah, the goal is to keep the focus on America First issues. Unfortunately, this is something that the president had to run for president to be able to make sure these issues got their time in the sun. We want to make sure that the establishment can't turn the page on these important issues, and we're going to make sure that when the left is trying to open up our borders and move away from big tech reform, that we keep that as the agenda.
Russ, it's so good to have you. Appreciate your insights. We're definitely going to have you back because it seems like Biden loves that $1 trillion mark and just loves to spend.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.